guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on my video. It's a super good one, so I hope you enjoy it because I'm really excited about it. Today we are going to be sewing a quilted jacket that is so cute. Let me explain. This project is actually something that I started 2 years ago, and I'm finishing it now. It's gonna be a little witchy, kind of spooky pink and like navy blues and black color scheme. And the fabric, the fabric is so cute. I've used like I think 15 fabrics maybe. I know it's at least 15 different fabrics, so there's a lot going on. I want to show you guys how I do it so that you can make your own. It's really not that hard. I would say that this is probably like an intermediate sewing project. If you are brand new to sewing, it might be a little difficult, but I think a beginner could do it. It's really not that difficult, and it's easy because the way that it works is I deconstruct and cut up a crew neck sweatshirt. There's no pattern involved. All you have to do is cut up the jacket, and then you have all the different parts. You cut it up, you have 2 sleeves, you have 2 front panels, and a back panel. And so after you finish quilting it, you just reassemble it, and boom. So I have some finished ones to show you so you kind of get an understanding of what the finished product's gonna look like. But it is gonna be a little different, and honestly it's gonna be even cuter. So these are 2 jackets that I made not last fall, but the fall before that. This is the one that's gonna be the most similar to the jacket that we're making today. It is a zombie girl jacket. So the lining especially, you can see the whole zombie girl fabric. You can see them like eating brains and kind of decomposing, and I think the colors in this fabric are really fun too. I chose 13 other fabrics to kind of go with the jacket. And it's all very fall inspired with the sunflowers, the pumpkins, kind of like a harvest, Halloween, maybe Thanksgiving-y kind of vibe. And there's 2 big patches that I did of the girls that I liked because look at how fabulous that is. It's got a button-up closure. I made the sleeves a different fabric. Sleeves is the skeleton fabric so that when you roll them, it looks super cute. I love this project and I'm very excited about it, if you couldn't tell. This other jacket that I made is all one fabric, so it's kind of cool. You can decide if you want to have all the different fabrics or if you want to do one. So this is just patches of all the same fabric, and it's a little froggy on a picnic kind of vibe. So there's little froggies on there, and then the inside is this really pretty green floral. And again, you can roll the sleeves and see that. The binding is a really cute mushroom fabric that I also used for the pockets. It also has these really cute little mushroom buttons on there that I really love. It just looks so cute. So now that you kind of get an idea of what the like quilted jacket is going to turn out to be, I want to show you guys what I have done so far, which is a good amount. But I do have another sleeve to do, so I'm able to show you guys kind of the whole process there. But I have this whole tub of my leftover squares that I use to make the jacket. This one's also featuring the Alexander Henry girlies, but this fabric is a little bit more of kind of like a witchy vibe. This is the back panel, and I put the little witch girl on the broomstick in the back, and I think it's super cute. And so this has a much more me color scheme, if you couldn't tell, like the pink and the black. This is a lot of blue, but much closer to my everyday style. So this one's really fun. I have so many different fabrics on here that I absolutely love. I have like little potion bottles, tarot cards, there's bats, there's ghosties, there's little mushrooms and frogs and toads and snails, and just so many fun different patterns. So this is one of the front panels, and this is the other panel, which I have finished here. And this is a little close-up here. We have this beautiful woman with a skull there who's really vibing, and more of the fabric. This little girl is so cute here. We have another little witchy up here. I tried to cut out the different fabrics to have the patches be really like nice framed pieces. And this toad. Look at how cute, little froggy guy and the mushrooms. I think that's so cute. And here is the other front panel. This beautiful little goth girl with the pink hair. We love it. And she's got a little lacy fan. It's so cute. Okay, and next are the sleeves. I only have one of them done, and then the last piece is going to be this other sleeve, and I will walk you through the whole process of doing that. It's basically the same for all the different panels in the back. This is the sleeve that's done. And this patch is a really cute little cat girl with some little thigh-high boots, and she's sitting on a jack-o'-lantern. So cute. And I love this fabric here with the bats. This is the top of the sleeve, and it wraps around here, and you sew it on like this. And again, I've chosen a really cute fabric that we're going to line the jacket with, so when you roll the sleeves, you get a real cool effect. And so this is the last piece that I need to do, and for that one we have a patch of this really cute little skeleton girl with a little parasol umbrella kind of vibe, and we're gonna put her on there. So if you look at this, all it is the sleeve of a crew neck sweater that I cut up. And this jacket's pretty inexpensive to make because you basically just need to buy 13 different fat quarters and a lining fabric. You can choose fabrics to make larger patches with if you want. Overall, you can make it pretty inexpensively by using a cheap crew neck or one that you already have. And it can be pretty worn in because you're cutting it up and you're putting fabric over both sides of it. So it doesn't have to be a new sweater. It can be one that you've had in your closet and you want to revamp it and turn it into a really cute jacket. I have been rambling for a very long time, so without further ado, I think we should get into the jacket. First off, we're going to check out all of our patches, make sure we have enough cut, and then we're going to finish this sleeve. Okay, first let's talk supplies. You're going to need a crew neck sweatshirt. I used a Gildan extra large, and you do want to size up at least 2 sizes because we start out by cutting out all the ribbing and seams of the sweater to make the panels that we're going to quilt on top of, so it'll be a little smaller when we reconstruct the jacket. Then you're going to need approximately 14 fat quarters of different fabrics. You'll need ½ yard for binding and 2½ yards for the lining. You'll also need threads and buttons if you want to add those as well. So I'm starting here by cutting out all the squares of the fat quarters that we're going to be using. For each fabric, you want to cut different size squares. You're going to want 2-inch wide by 3-inch high, as well as 2-inch wide by 4-inch high, as well as 2.5-inch by 3, 2.5-inch by 4, 3-inch by 3-inch, and 3-inch by 4-inch. And you want to repeat that until you run out of fabric. The reason we do 3-inch high and 4-inch high width is because we want to stagger the different heights to create a less uniform grid when we start making strips in the next step. Next, we want to organize the squares into 2 piles. Choose 7 of the 14 and put them into the first pile, and the remainder in a second pile. We want to create 2 different variations of strips so we can stagger the different fabrics in the jacket to ensure no fabric is touching another square with the same fabric. After organizing the squares, we'll begin to make our strips. You may have noticed I already have strips made of the first 7 squares, so now I'm just starting on the strips of the second pile of fabrics, but the process is going to be the same for both sets. So once you decide the order of your strips, you're going to take the first 2 squares and folding them good sides together, you're going to sew across the top to connect the squares. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, approximately, and you also want to set your machine to about 12 to 14 stitches per inch. Now you don't need to worry about locking the stitches here because we will go over the ends again when we attach the strips to the crew neck, and we'll start locking the stitches then. After you've attached your first 2 squares, you move on to the next one. So I'm taking the 3rd square, again folding good sides together and sewing across the top. Sewing all the squares together is the same process until you have a strip long enough to cover the panel of the crew neck that you're working on, approximately 6 to 7 squares. After you've finished assembling your strips, it's very important to press your seams. And you want to press your seams from the bottom up so that the seam is facing the top of the strip. And you can see on this strip, I have not yet pressed the seams, so they're really sticking up. So to press the seams, all you do is take your iron and run it along the strip. Next, flip it over and we're going to press the seam in the same direction on the front, and it's going to really flatten it out and make it look nice. So after you've cut up the different panels of your crew neck, I'm working on the sleeves right now, so this is what a finished one looks like. But the process for each panel of the jacket is the same, so I'll show you how the sleeve works, and you can do that on every single panel. So lay out the panel you're going to work on. This is the sleeve, and you're going to start taking your strips and laying them out. And remember, you want to stagger the two different kinds of strips that you made so that none of the same fabrics are touching. After you have it planned out, we're going to start pinning it together. Leaving the first strip in the place that it is, we're going to take the second strip and flip it over. With good sides together, we're going to start pinning the two strips together directly onto the crew neck. So your pin is going to go through both strips and the crew neck. I like to place pins about 1 inch apart, and so I'm using about 3 on this edge. And then we're going to go ahead and sew a straight line where we just put all the pins. That way, when we flip over this strip, it'll be attached to the jacket. So at the machine now, I'm going to start by sewing and locking the edge of the seam. And I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here as well. And I'm just going to sew all the way down, making sure not to go over any pins until I reach the edge of the sleeve. And don't forget, you're going to also want to lock the end of your stitch. After that, you head back to your ironing board and make sure that you trim any edges of your stitches because you really don't want your machine to jam. Trust me, it's a pain in the butt. And then we're going to flip over the strip and we're going to press our seam again. So we're going to run the iron along the seam that we just made and flatten it out so that it sits perfectly on the panel of the jacket. And it's really important that you do this after you finish sewing each strip. You want them all to lay flat before you pin on the next strip, or else it's not going to fit on the jacket right and you're going to have a lot of issues. But once that seam is pressed, you can take your third strip and flip it over good sides together and start pinning it together to sew that one on. And it's also important to note that you want to sew down in the direction that the seam is pressed. That way you don't run into troubles of it flipping up while you're trying to sew. Hello. I very abruptly stopped sewing yesterday because the entire day I was filming all of yesterday and sewing. I had a really bad migraine, and at one point I eventually just gave up everything and went to lay down. So we were working on the sleeve, I know that for sure, and we had just finished putting down some strips. I did add another one off camera, so I have 4 strips down, and the next step is that I'm going to work on adding this big strip with the large patch onto the jacket. So if you don't have a fabric where you want a large patch, or you don't have an image that you want large and you just want all kind of similar sized squares, you can kind of completely forget this part that I'm going to show you and just keep on cooking with your strips on all your panels and you'll be good to go. But this one's a little funky. I kind of do some weird stuff just to be able to have this larger image amongst all the little squares. So that's what we're going to work on next. First off, I'm going to take the rows that I've placed underneath and I'm going to sew these together first. So I'm just going to take the first one and put good sides together and take it over to the machine and sew this strip together. And after that's sewn together, it's time to add the third little strip on there. And we're just going to sew straight down, and then all 3 pieces are attached. After that bottom part is done, we're going to move to the top and do the exact same thing. Flip over the first one, stitch it together, and then the third one. Once those 2 pieces are done, make sure that you press the seams in the back so that they're nice and flat, and then flip over that first top piece, and we're going to take it and sew a straight line across. And remember, you want to sew in the direction of the seam that you pressed. Next, we're gonna do the same thing with the bottom, but flipping it up on top of the larger patch and sew it across, and then we're gonna take it to the ironing table and press the seams. And then after that, I just treat it like it's a regular strip. I'm gonna pin it down in place, sew it down, and then take it to the ironing board and flatten out the seam. And then after that large patch, I just have a couple more strips to sew down, and so I just do that real quick off camera because I don't want this video to last 3 hours. And after all the strips are down, you just want to grab some scissors and from the back, go ahead and trim the excess of the strips to fit the shape of the sleeve. Next, I want to add a border around the larger patches to help frame them and make them stand out more. This is something that I did on the last jacket that I made. You can see this embroidery stitch here. It just really helps make them pop, I think. So I need to pick out a stitch to put around here, but I think I want to do one with a contrast pink thread with little hearts. But first, I have accumulated a lot of little fuzzies and loose threads all over the pieces, and so I'm gonna go ahead and lint roll them to make them nice and clean, because while I'm working on this embroidery stitch, I really don't want to jam my machine because I need this to look crisp. And while I'm working on that, my grandma is actually staying with me for the weekend, and she is helping make some binding for the jacket. I'm not going to have a little tutorial here on how to make the binding because it is fairly simple, but you can look that up. Basically, you just need a little binding tape maker and pull it along the strip that you've cut out and iron it, and bam, you've got some beautiful binding. I'm really thankful she's here. She really wanted to be a part of the jacket making process, so yeah. Okay, and now back to the embroidery stitch. I went ahead and tested out a heart-shaped stitch on one of the girlies, and I think it came out really good. You can see under here I have drawn lines with an iron-off pen to kind of help me keep the line really straight, and now I'm going to show you how I do that on the other one. So I take a Madame So sewing pen, and this is heat activated. It disappears when you iron it, so it's really helpful to use on fabric. And I'm going to use a straight edge to draw a straight line border around the patch so that I can ensure my stitches are straight.
When Grandma would go to her seniors quilting on Wednesday and she could still drive, the ladies would get together and make a quilt, and then they would raffle it off, and the donations would go towards activities at the senior center. She enjoyed that group so much. She rode there on her bicycle because she couldn't drive anymore.
Wow.
So she rode on her bicycle to the quilting classes. One of the ladies was called Anne, and I enjoyed knowing her so much.
That's
And
awesome.
her job was to make binding. So whenever I'm making binding, it's like, I remember Anne.
That's so cute. Okay, and now that I have the line work done, we can head over to the machine and start stitching. So I'm actually going to start with this back piece here, and this is what the stitch looks like. I did a little test strip, and I'm just going to follow the line that I drew. And it's very important to not push or pull the fabric through the machine while you're doing an embroidery stitch like this, because it can really distort the design. And so my hands are barely on this fabric, lightly feeding it, making sure that the needle doesn't get caught, and just making sure that it stays in a nice, smooth, straight line. And when you reach a corner, you want to make sure your needle is down on the point, and you're going to lift your presser foot and turn the fabric so that your line matches up with your sewing foot. This ensures that the stitch will not go off of the mark and look all wonky, so this is really the best way to go about the corners in my opinion. And then as you start to reach the end, you want to be careful that your threads from the beginning don't get caught in the machine, but you don't want to cut them yet. So I'm kind of holding them with my hand under the fabric to make sure that it doesn't get caught until I reach where I want my needle to stop and it matches the first stitch of the very beginning. And we're leaving these tails at the beginning, and you want to leave some at the end so that we can pull them to the back and tie them in a knot to help secure the stitch. That way it never comes unraveled and your little hearts stay in place and don't get ruined. And to get the two threads, the tails that are on the front side of the fabric, I'm going to use a little sewing needle and thread the tails and just pull them through the stitch to the other side. And then you want to take the 4 tails and just tie them in a knot, make sure it's nice and secure, and once it's all knotted up, you can trim it and it should be good to go. And then once all of your little borders are done, we're going to go back with the iron over the pen marks and watch some magic happen. It's going to disappear right before your eyes, and this is what you're left with. It's honestly so satisfying, but I'm really happy with how the stitch came out. And next we finally made it to the part where we cut out the binding. This is fairly straightforward. We're going to take all of the different panels of the jacket, the 2 front panels, the 2 arm panels, and the back panel, and trace out the shape of each panel so that it perfectly matches up. And then we just repeat that for each piece. Okay. We have made it to a very exciting point in the process. It is time to actually start constructing the jacket, and it's going to become wearable. So I have already started with one of the front sides, and we're going to do the other side next, and I'll show you how to do that. It's the exact same, but it's starting to come together. So let's go ahead and get started on the next front half. So once you have your pieces laid out, you're going to want to take your front panel and flip it out, because we are going to be sewing good sides together to make the seam of the jacket on the inside. And then we're going to start pinning. It's very important to make sure that you have every single layer of the jacket lined up perfectly. There should be 6 layers, both lining pieces, both quilted pieces, and both parts of the sweatshirt. It can be a little tricky to make sure that each layer matches up perfectly, so if you want, you can cut the edge perfectly, but I didn't really need to do that here. And once we have everything perfectly pinned, we can go over to the sewing machine. And don't forget, you want to lock your stitch and have a 1/4 seam allowance, and we're just going to sew a straight line across the shoulder of the jacket. I also switched my machine over to a quilting foot because I'm going to be sewing through so many layers. And after you finish the straight line, you're going to want to go back over the edge of the jacket with a zigzag stitch to help make sure that the shoulder doesn't fray and break that straight stitch. And this is what that looks like. Don't judge me, I did it pretty sloppy, but you get the point. And then it's time to attach the sleeve to the jacket. So you want to make sure that you have the lining pinned up together through all 6 layers again. And once the top of the sleeve is starting to get pinned to the shoulder, you want to ease it so that there's no bunching. And once you're good to go, you can head back to the sewing machine. And once again, we're going to want to do a straight line across the shoulder. And it's really important that you make sure there's no bunching. And so once you have the fabric eased and pinned, you're going to need to stretch it a little bit as you sew, just to ensure that you don't have any folds when you're done. And then after that, make sure you don't forget to finish your edge with another zigzag stitch. And once your sleeves and your front panels are attached and all the pieces are one, you're going to want to close the sleeves, and you're also going to want to sew down the sides of the jacket, and then the whole jacket is done. Make sure you zigzag your edges, you lock all your stitches, and you'll be good to go. We have finished assembling the jacket for today. We are taking a break and finishing tomorrow, but so yeah, see you tomorrow. Okay, today is the final day of working on this jacket until it is finished. The jacket is assembled. It's time to start working on the binding. The binding is all finished, wrapped up here, and it looks really cute, the spider webs. After the binding's done, we'll be pretty much done. let's get started.
So I decided I wanted a little bit more of a V-shape neck at the top, so I just went ahead and cut along the edge to kind of shape it. And you want to make sure all your layers are perfectly lined up. So you might want to trim the edges, especially on the sleeves. And then it's time to pin it, or in this case, I'm going to be using sewing clips, which are really nice. And I'm going to put that around all the edges to make sure that each layer is lined up and will stay in place while I'm sewing. And I'm going very slow with this to make sure that I catch all the fabrics, and there's no harm in that. This took me a while, and I just have to make sure that it's perfect. And of course, don't forget to zigzag the edge once again. And then it's time for the final step, adding the binding. So I'm going very slow with this again, and I didn't use pins because I'm lazy, but I'm just unfolding it and sewing it along the edge, and after that I flip it over and do a top stitch on the other side of the binding. Alright guys, we've made it to the final reveal, and I am so happy with how this came out. I really hope you guys give it a try. It's so much fun and a really great introduction to quilting. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.